There is a corridor in Florence where 4 men have been trying to escape from stone for 500 years. They are giants, each one over 2.5 meters tall, carved from solid marble, and none of them are finished, not abandoned the way a half-built house is abandoned. Unfinished in a way that feels deliberate. A torso erupts from raw stone and stops. A face pushes through the surface and disappears back into it. A pair of legs emerge from the block and simply end. The hands are still sealed inside the marble. The head of one figure is still completely buried. When visitors walk through the Accademia Gallery in Florence, most of them are there for one reason. They want to reach the end of the corridor and see David. But these 4 figures stop them because the figures appear to be alive. Not alive in the way great art is alive. Alive in the physical sense, like they are moving, right now, in a direction they cannot reach. Michelangelo called them the prisoners, and the question of whether he meant to leave them this way, or whether this is simply what failure looks like, has no clean answer. Even now, in 1505, Pope Julius II summoned Michelangelo to Rome with a task: build the greatest tomb in the history of Christianity. What Julius described was not modest, a freestanding 3-story structure, 40 life-size marble figures, to be placed at the very center of St. Peter's Basilica, where the tomb of St. Peter himself stood. The project was so vast that Michelangelo spent a full year doing nothing but sourcing marble from the quarries at Carrara. He believed it was the work of his lifetime. Then Julius stopped returning his visits. The payments stopped. Michelangelo appeared at the papal chamber and was turned away. He wrote later, "If I stayed in Rome, my own tomb would be made before the Pope's." So he fled, rode hard until he crossed into Florentine territory, where the papal guards could not follow. The reasons for the cancellation were never fully documented. The most likely explanation is that Julius diverted the funds to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica itself and simply had nothing left for a tomb. There is also a theory, documented in the account of Julius's own architect, that Michelangelo was warned building your tomb while still alive was bad luck, that Julius got superstitious and pulled back. Whatever the reason, Michelangelo spent the next 40 years trying to finish it. The project was renegotiated 6 times. The design shrank with every contract. The 40-figure monument became a wall tomb with 6 figures. Then, fewer, and the prisoners, always meant to anchor the base of the structure, flanking the niches like defeated captives, were carved in bursts between 1519 and 1534. Then abandoned when the final contract reduced the number of figures required. Michelangelo called the Julius tomb La Tragedia del Sepolcro, the tragedy of the tomb. His biographer Condivi described it as bringing the artist infinite difficulties, displeasures, and troubles, and what is worse, infamy. It was the one commission he never recovered from. Each of the 4 prisoners is at a different stage of completion. Together, they read like a sequence, as if Michelangelo began all 4 at the same time and stopped each one at a different moment, leaving a record of the carving process frozen at 4 separate points. The awakening slave is the least finished. Almost 9 feet tall, the figure appears to be hauling itself out of the block, one knee straining forward, the head tilted back as if breaking the surface of water. The left arm is still sealed in stone. The face is barely roughed in. And yet the torso is polished, detailed, finished. The contrast between the 2 surfaces is violent. The Atlas slave is the most unsettling. The head is completely buried in the marble above it. No face visible, no expression possible. The figure carries the weight of the uncarved stone on its neck, like the Titan condemned to hold up the sky. The body below communicates an almost unbearable heaviness. The young slave is further along. The arm is raised, bent at the elbow, covering the forehead, a gesture of exhaustion. The right arm is behind the back, and if you look closely at the wrist, you can see the chain. This is the only figure where the restraint is visible. The bearded slave is the most complete. The face is visible. Bearded, the expression is somewhere between effort and resignation. And what that face tells you is that even finished, These figures were never meant to be heroic. They were always meant to be defeated. Michelangelo's process is still visible in all four. He worked front to back, carving the prominent surfaces first, peeling the figure away from the stone plane by plane. On the awakening slave, you can still see the chisel marks, the pointed chisel scoring the rough areas, the claw chisel smoothing the surfaces he planned to finish next. These are not random stopping points. Each figure is at the natural end of a carving phase, as if Michelangelo put the chisel down at the end of a session and never came back. Here is where 5 centuries of art historians disagree. Were the prisoners left unfinished because the commission collapsed, or were they left unfinished on purpose? The case for accident is straightforward. The contract was cancelled. The figures were no longer required. Michelangelo moved to Rome in 1534 and never returned to them. He gave them away. They sat in an outdoor grotto in the Boboli Gardens for 3 centuries, exposed to weather, unsheltered. That is not how you treat a finished masterwork. Art historian Rocky Ruggiero is direct about this. The sculptures, he argues, are often incorrectly described as intentionally unfinished. The project died. The figures stayed where they were. But the case for intention is harder to dismiss. Michelangelo left nearly half of everything he ever made in an unfinished state. Not just the prisoners. The Rondinini Piet, which he was still carving 3 days before his death at 88, is just as raw. The St. Matthew, the Florence Piet, all of them the same. A career-long pattern of stopped figures. And there is what Michelangelo wrote about marble. He believed the figure already existed inside the block, that his job was only to remove the excess stone. He wrote, "The more the marble wastes, the more the statue grows." He had absorbed Neoplatonic philosophy as a teenager in the Medici court, the idea that matter imprisons the soul, that the body is the soul's cage, that all physical things are imperfect copies of ideal forms that exist elsewhere. From that position, an unfinished sculpture is not a failure. The rough stones still surrounding the figure makes the imprisonment visible, literal. You can see exactly what the soul is fighting against. The problem is, you cannot prove intent from the object alone. The prisoners look identical, whether Michelangelo stopped because he chose to, or because Julius's heirs stopped paying. Most visitors miss this entirely. The prisoners line both sides of the corridor, 4 struggling, half-emerged figures. And at the end, in a circular room under a dome of natural light, stands David,